Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Lani Habrock here, your Government Affairs Director for the Council on American Islamic Relations, Oklahoma chapter. Today is our very first episode in our series, Coffee with the Candidates. Very excited. We have an amazing, perfect guest today. Before we get started, I just want to say CAIR Oklahoma is a 501c3. We are a nonprofit. We do not support or oppose any candidate. These are simply informational videos so that you can get to know your candidates who are running for your office. We are nonpartisan. But today, our first guest is Mari Turner. Mari Turner is the regional field director for the ACLU's Smart Justice campaign. And the reason why Mari's on here, if you haven't heard, Mari is the first Muslim Oklahoman to win a primary in our state. And on top of that, this was quite an impressive campaign. I want to start off by saying congratulations in winning your primary. Amazing job, especially during this time when you can't knock doors. But we'll just jump right in. So when I first started working for CAIR, you were one of the first people I met with. And I remember we were sitting at Cafe Nova off Western, and I said, so when are you going to run for office? And you said, Oklahoma is not ready for me, girl. You said, I am a Black woman, I'm Muslim, and I'm part of the LGBTQ plus community. They're not ready. So I want to ask, what made you feel like District 88 was ready, or what made you say, I don't care if y'all are ready, I'm coming?
Right. I think kind of the real turning point for me is, I don't know, a lot of people will tell you about this stat that women have to be asked at least 7 times to run for office before they start taking it seriously and believe in them as much as people believe in them, right? And I think that goes up once you start talking about Black women and Muslim women and queer women, right? And then once you compound all those together. And so you had asked me that, and several other people that live within House District 88. And and it was really just coming from just about everywhere. So I would get Facebook messages, I would get Instagram messages. Sometimes it would be sitting down at coffee. And so I decided, because for me, the goal was to go into politics, to never become a politician. I went to university to become a veterinarian. But once I started getting into politics and doing policy advocacy, I realized that I didn't want to do politics because I just feel there's a lot of career politicians out there. But I also kind of amended that to realize that if my community was asking me to run, right, if people were continuously asking me to run, then I would listen to my community, because a part of community organizing is to understand that communities know what they need, right? And know how to ask for those things, know how to do those things, right? And so if my community was asking me to run, then I would listen to them. And I would also take the advice that I'm continuously giving to students across Oklahoma about why it's important that we see ourselves in the parts of our society that make, interpret, and enforce the policies that affect our lives directly. So it was very much so people were asking me, and so I just kind of answered that call, as cliche as it may sound, and decided to take the advice that I'm continuously giving everybody else.
That's awesome. Well, and I think something that a lot of people don't know unless they're in the political world is that when you run against an incumbent, specifically an incumbent of your own party, you do not have the support of the establishment. You did not have the Democratic Party saying, hey, we're going to support you. We're here for you. First of all, what was that like? And second of all, how did you overcome that mental obstacle? Because that takes a lot of mental strength to do that.
Yeah, I think for me, I kind of ran, I tried to I think we tried to garner and tried to kind of center ourselves in a campaign that was heavily rooted in deep community-based power. That is the only thing I'm interested in working in. That's the only the power I'm trying to build. And the only thing I really want to do at the beginning and at the end of every day. So to keep that in mind and stay centered on that, like really kind of helped. I also kind of distanced myself from like thinking so much about the establishment itself, because like we're trying to change it. But if I'm too busy focused on the downfalls that it might have on me, then I couldn't fully invest in the community the way I wanted to. That looked like very, very different the last kind of leg of the race, when there were women who endorsed against me, when there were queer women who endorsed against me, when there were women of color who endorsed against me, right, within the establishment. But honestly, I think like with community organizing, something I kind of learned throughout this time is that like you need a little bit of like anger to kind of push that fire a little bit, like to ignite you in a different way. And so that kind of helped propel me forward a little bit in making sure that I was digging deep into that community-based power. And a lot of it, I think, is that like this campaign, this movement is about not forcing ourselves to have a seat at the table, but creating a table, right? Creating an equitable table from the beginning. And so I can see how people would think, and I can understand how the mindset that some would have to try to hold on to a small piece of power that folks in the establishment allow someone to have every now and then. And so I could see like why that is like where those endorsements might come from. But yet again, like cannot reiterate enough that this campaign is about building that deep community-based power. Like the fact that you can no longer make laws and policies that affect our everyday lives without us being there, right? Nothing about us without us, right? This all of us or none mentality, because our liberation is tied to one another. And so that's also kind of the hope that we will start having those conversations and changing. Like I'm also in the work, like community organizing is also changing hearts and minds. And so making sure that we are not only just kind of saying like, okay, that happened and moving past it, but like having a conversation on like why it's important that deep community-based power is at the center of every type of work that we do. And so like it was a really kind of like that last maybe 3-4 weeks there, that last month maybe, to see the work that the establishment was doing, right? And really to take it and kind of set us even further down that path, that trajectory of digging deep into the community in a way that like we hadn't done before, but also had been continuously doing since the beginning of the campaign. If that makes like any sense at all. So it just kind of used it as fuel for the fire to do something great, which I'm really glad we walked away with more than just like a moral win on Tuesday. And so, yeah, if that answered your question. So.
Yeah, well, so I think what I hear you saying is that people that we would typically think that that you would be a better representative for actually endorsed your opponent because they were feeling like, okay, like at least we have a little bit of say with this person. And if she gets elected, what if she doesn't win the general election? At least this person is more middle of the road or looks more like the establishment of the other party or something like that. Is that kind of what I hear you're saying?
Yeah, I think it's like a little bit of like, kind of like, this is what I know, right? This is what I'm used to. And so let me go ahead and throw my support behind this rather than like taking a step into the unknown, right? And when you don't focus, like when your work isn't focused, and like, I want to like make a disclaimer, like this isn't a drag or a direct attack, but like when your work doesn't focus in community-based power, in communities, right? And help and support 24/7, it's a little bit harder to take a step into that in an unknown area. Mm-hmm. And so I think it was like, this is what I know, and this is what I'm comfortable with. And I think people just like didn't expect this type of campaign or it to happen like this, right? And so that also makes it a lot easier, right, to endorse someone that you've known and worked with for a long time, whether you like whatever your relationship with that person is. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so that really brings me to my next question is, your opponent, he did a lot of great work whenever he was serving and everything. And I don't want to take away from any of the accomplishments or good things that he did. But I want to ask you, what do you think it was about your message that really resonated with District 88 and allowed that political upset to happen?
I think there were like a lot of things, and not necessarily just the messaging for the campaign, but I think one of the big things is that like nothing about us without us, like having that deep shared lived experience with Oklahomans who live in this district and with folks in the US, right, in general, because like it was very strange to have like, it's not like something that the nation, like everybody in the nation was looking at, but like to garner like national support. Like there were folks who didn't, like that I've never met personally, but like held fundraisers for the campaign, right? I think it was the fact that people saw themselves in this campaign, and there were a lot of things that this campaign kind of hinged on, but I think a big thing that this campaign hinged on was making sure that we were turning out a new electorate, right? The folks who don't necessarily show up in a primary because they don't feel invested in politics, because they don't feel like politics have invested in them, right? And so for me, right, to be able to see a candidate like that would make me want to show up to a primary. And I think that was like what folks were hearing. And I think it was still like without being able to knock doors, we still had those personal touches. We did phone calls to check in on folks to see how they were doing in the district in the midst of COVID, right? It wasn't just about who are you going to vote for come June 30th, but it was like, do you need resources? Where can we plug you in? It was the handwritten postcards that we did to folks in the district it was the digital office hours where people could just kind of come in and ask their questions, right? It was making sure that we tailored a campaign to the people, that we actually met people where they were, right? And so like we had our standard volunteer nights on Tuesdays and Thursdays to do phone banking. And if you didn't feel comfortable phone banking, it was to do texting. And if you didn't feel comfortable texting, you could do postcards. And if you wanted to do phone calls, but you couldn't make it on Tuesday nights, then we left those phone banks open. And so you could just say like, hey, I have a free hour and I want to make some phone calls like for the campaign, right? So we made sure that we met people where they were, one. In terms of like dipping themselves like into politics for the first time ever for some folks, we made sure that two, that like we tried to be as much of the embodiment of nothing about us without us, and made sure that this was a campaign that was built on truth and transparency, and not saying others weren't, just saying like this was a little done in a different way, right, altogether. I think that part of that was because of COVID, but also because like everybody that worked on this campaign is a community organizer, and so yeah, just like meeting the people where they are and giving them kind of this renewed sense of hope and trust in a candidate. A lot of people just said that they just like hadn't felt excited about someone in a long time. And a lot of people were just really excited about having that visibility, right? Having that visibility and shared lived experience. So there are like a lot of things at play and why this looked different and why it kind of, I guess, made the splash it did. But I think those are kind of the top three things.
Yeah, well, that whole nothing about us without us. I mean, that's very American. I mean, that harkens back to no taxation without representation. You know, it's just coming back to the heart of what we are as America. And in my opinion, during this time, we've been doing so much work since we've been at home with the coronavirus and quarantine. We've been doing so much work on trying to change hearts and minds digitally and trying to say, you know, this is the America we want. Like what we have, it's great, but this is what we want. And now is when people are working on it. And I feel like your campaign was the epitome of that, in my opinion. I have to say here, CAIR Oklahoma does not support or endorse any candidates. And also, I will say that you do have an opponent coming up in November. And we will invite them to be on one of these chats as well. We're inviting everybody who is going to be in the general election or in a runoff. But Mari, as our Muslim candidate, we definitely wanted you to be our very first one. So we'll move on to a little bit of policy discussion. What is one issue that you really wish voters knew more about or were more educated on?
For sure. I guess there are so many, but I think in Oklahoma specifically, our justice system is at the epicenter of like just about all of the issues that we're facing when it comes to affordable housing, when it comes to public education, when it comes to integrated healthcare. You can almost always find our prison industrial complex or our justice system like right there at the center of it. And so like, I wish the information was, I guess, a little bit more readily available for people to be able to deep dive into the holds that Oklahoma's justice system has on families, on individuals. And I wish we did a better job at highlighting or trying to peel back that veil, right, of the black box that is our justice system. Because a lot of people cheer and promote this idea that the justice system, like you do the crime, you do the time, and like that's it. Like it is a flawless system that just kind of moves along. But Oklahoma having one of the highest rates of incarceration in the world doesn't happen because we have this pristine system of law and order, but it happens because we have antiquated policies, but because we don't emphasize de-escalation, because we don't take the time to actually deconstruct that black box and like the way we weaponize our justice system against our marginalized and disenfranchised communities. And so I think that if people were able to attain the knowledge to kind of do a little bit more deeper research on our justice system, like it would be the policies and laws that we could create around it to make it an equitable and just system that
so sorry.
Sorry.
My phone is off, but it rang on my computer. I apologize. Also, that's my sister's ringtone.
No, that's perfect. So but I don't know. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. So you're saying the justice system is one that you really wish that people knew more about. So should you be elected in November, is that going to be one of your priorities as you work in the legislature?
I would say absolutely. I, growing up, being a product of Oklahoma's prison system, being a product of Oklahoma's public education system, like I kind of realize how those things kind of go hand in hand, and how I feel personally, if we start with correcting our flaws within the justice system and what that truly looks like intersectionally and equitably, then I think we could alleviate a lot of the stress on our other systems, and we could start to be able to utilize and lean more heavily on our mental health services. We could start to be able to adequately fund our mental health services, integrated health services as a whole, and really kind of work on what public education looks like and how we fund that too. But for me, I think that I would like to start with our prison system.
Mm-hmm. Well, and if you are elected, you'll be the very first Muslim elected to the Oklahoma State Legislature. How do you feel that your faith has impacted, say, maybe your campaign leading up to here, and how do you think it will impact your service in the state legislature?
I think my faith and how I deal with the justice system are, I wouldn't say one and the same, but definitely have been running parallel towards each other, or with each other, for the entirety of my life. I am Muslim, and a lot of African American, a lot of Black Muslims find their way to Islam via the justice system, via the prison system. My baba, he converted while in prison, and my mother was Baptist at the time, and my dad being Muslim, they raised us with principles from both. And so that was just like always at the forefront of my mind when I started doing community organizing, was the number of our Black and brown brothers and sisters within the justice system, within the Islamic faith. And I think about that, and I keep that at the center of my heart when I do this work. And I think it affects it in a way that could only help better me, and having that, I guess, shared lived experience, or being tied with someone who has been directly impacted by Oklahoma's justice system, has definitely kind of helped propel me forward down that path. And then I think about the folks that I'm continuously working with when I do my work at the ACLU, folks who have been previously released from jail or prison that have also found Islam. And I think about that. Thank you. I think about that continuously when I do my work, right? I try to make sure that I am thinking about how this work affects folks in an equitable fashion, right? And so, and I guess like when I say that, I mean like while I like Islam like holds a key portion of my heart, but I also think about like how our justice system affects our immigration system, right? How our justice system affects our LGBTQ plus Oklahomans, and I think about how it affects our folks who are suffering from mental health crisis, and just kind of how folks continuously navigate that system. And if we aren't always at a place where we're actively thinking about not just like how it affects me in my personal walk, but how it affects my community, then we can't really do this work in an equitable fashion, right? If we're not always working in community with someone that is different than us, right? Then we can't fully utilize a system that is supposed to better Oklahomans if we are not thinking about all Oklahomans. And so Islam is a really big driving force in my life, but it helps me continuously realize that it's not just about me at the center of it. It's about like everybody, and making sure that, yet again, like we all are at this table and we are all eating, right? And so, yeah.
Well, how important do you think it is just the fact that you're outwardly Muslim, that you wear hijab? How important do you think that that is for people to see, Muslims and non-Muslims alike, in our state?
Yeah. The funny thing about that is so let's see, I think I was sitting in my third grade class when we turned on the news and saw the story of the Twin Towers. And I think kind of like at that moment in my life was like when I realized that like this wasn't something I was going to talk about. Like Islam wasn't something I was going to actively talk about. And so to be completely honest, I didn't come out to any of my friends as being Muslim until I was leaving high school and heading to Stillwater for university. Because in my mind, and I made a post the other day about how relational organizing has saved my life and continues to do so. But at that young age, in the third grade, I had made a conscious decision to not talk about these things, and didn't do so until I was at a place where I felt like I was ready to be able to take on that fight, whatever it looks like, whenever I did start telling people that. And because like the very first time I told a friend that I was Muslim, we were sitting down eating sushi, and at this time, like one of my best friends, like he looks at me across the table and he says, "Oh, you're one of those towel heads." And this was at a time where I had never worn hijab, like I had never like covered my hair, anything like that. But I also realized at that lunch, right, and that dinner, that lunch and that time, that I did everything I could to show you that that I am a wonderful person, right? That I am personally a wonderful person. I did everything I could to show you that, like, I'm just like a kind-hearted person. And then to have something like that be said for a friend, like for many years, right? To realize that it took like that moment to realize that sometimes, like, it's no matter what you do, like there are folks that won't be able to accept you. But for everybody else in my life, they were like, "Oh, that's cool. Like, let's talk about that. Like, let's talk more about that." And it got to a point where I joined a church because I just like, I felt pressured into doing it. And I didn't know how to say no, like back, I think it was like in middle school or something. But anyway, and so like, being openly Muslim is something I'm very thankful and proud of at this point in time in my life. But it wasn't something that was always afforded to me, should I say. And so I'm hoping, right, that like when I looked out at Ilhan in her race back in 2016, I was like, that gave me hope, right? That gave me hope for others to come after her and that walk. And I didn't think that I would be one of them, but the hope is that like there will be more young Muslim folks that's like stand in their power, right? And like there will be shortcomings, right? There will be kind of some obstacles that you come up against, but it feels good to be able to be a part of that, and to hopefully try to inspire somebody else to step out on their faith within themselves. So.
Well, thank you for taking your hurt and turning that to courage, and just being a voice for people, no matter whatever the outcome is in November. Like you're a success, and you've made a difference in a lot of people's lives. We'll go ahead and we'll wrap up. Thank you everybody for listening, and we will post this link to our social media and send it out in our weekly newsletter. If you'd like to sign up for our newsletter, go to cairoklahoma.com. And final thoughts, Mari, got anything to say to people, to our listeners?
I like, if you want to know a little bit more about myself and the campaign, you can find that at maurieturner.com. And we are getting ready to ramp up direct voter contact and community outreach again. We all just kind of needed a break for a minute. And so I'm really excited about that, but very much so like want to stress that like building deep community-based power is not just something that we are doing with this campaign, but it's something that grassroots organizers are doing across the nation. And I would definitely encourage you to look into that and see like how you can plug in your community. Because yet again, the wave of organizing, the wave of deep community-based power that's coming, that's building, is something so remarkable. And there's a spot for everybody in the movement. And so I'm really excited to be able to do this work with some really great people here in Oklahoma. And I would like you to be a part of it too. So if that's something that you're interested in, please like reach out. Like we could talk more about organizing, about the campaign specifically, or anything else that you're just kind of wondering about and just kind of need somebody to bounce ideas off of. But yeah, that's it. Like nothing about us without us. And I hope that you'll take a step out on yourself and on your community, and realize that like it's time. Your voice is powerful beyond measure. So yeah.
All right. Salam, everyone. Have a great day.